This is the psychological framework that separates the people who actually become who they're capable of being from the majority who spend their entire lives running away from it. 5 minds, 1 framework. James Clear, Ryan Holiday, Abraham Maslow, Carl Jung, and the 2 men who proved all of it in real life, Kobe Bryant and David Goggins. By the end of this video, you'll understand why most people never change, and the answer has nothing to do with discipline or information. They are psychologically locked into a version of themselves they never consciously chose. And more importantly, you're going to understand exactly how to break that lock. 4 parts. The Elimination Protocol, the Identity Inversion, the Sovereignty Tax, and the Congruence Lock. Part 1. The Elimination Protocol. Why you can't build on top of a lie. You are not failing to become who you want to be because you haven't added enough to your life. And the answer isn't a better morning routine or a new productivity system. You're failing because you haven't removed what doesn't belong. Most people approach self-improvement the same broken way. New habits layered over old identity. New goals stacked onto a self-concept that was never examined, never chosen, never aligned with the person they're actually trying to become. Before we talk about James Clear and atomic habits, we need to talk about Carl Jung, because Jung identified the problem at its root, deeper than habits, deeper than behavior, deeper than anything the conscious mind can reach on its own. Jung called it the shadow. The shadow is the part of your psychology that contains everything you've rejected about yourself. Every trait that got labeled unacceptable by your parents, your environment, your culture, the people whose approval you needed to survive. Aggression, ambition, the desire to be great, the parts of you that were too much, too loud, too different, and rather than destroying them, you buried them, and they've been running the show from underground ever since. Jung put it plainly, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it becomes, accumulating power the longer it stays unconscious, hijacking decisions you think are rational, and keeping you locked in a version of yourself you outgrew years ago. And then there's the line that should stop you cold. A man possessed by his shadow is always standing in his own light, falling into his own traps, living below his own level. Not unlucky, not lacking talent, not missing the right opportunity, possessed by an unexamined psychology that keeps him exactly where he is and keeps him comfortable doing it. That's what James Clear is pointing at when he argues that your current behaviors are simply a reflection of your current identity. That what you do now is a mirror image of the type of person you believe yourself to be. The behaviors aren't the problem, the identity underneath them is, and before it can be consciously rebuilt, you have to understand what's actually in it. Clear's model runs 3 layers deep. Outcomes, which is what you get, processes, which is what you do, and identity, which is what you believe. The conventional approach moves from the outside in, setting a goal first and hoping the identity catches up. That approach fails almost every time, which is why Clear argues it needs to run the other direction entirely. The Elimination Protocol starts at the identity level, and it starts with the most uncomfortable question most people will ever sit with: who are you right now actually? Not the aspiration, not the story you perform at dinner. Who are you on an average Tuesday when nobody's watching? And what does your behavior vote for? Researchers at Duke University found that habits account for approximately 40% of our behaviors on any given day, meaning nearly half of what you do isn't a decision at all. It's a program running in the background, a program you didn't consciously write, and one that most people never stop to read. The Elimination Protocol is the audit. Jung's shadow work and Clear's identity inventory are the same operation described in different languages, one from analytical psychology and one from behavioral science, both pointing at the same truth. You cannot build a new identity on top of an unexamined one. You have to go in first. Part 2. The identity inversion. Becoming the person before you have the proof. The mechanism of change isn't insight, and it isn't motivation, and it isn't finally having the right information. The mechanism is decision. You don't wait for evidence to change your identity. You change the identity first, and the evidence follows. Clear calls this identity-based habits, and it's the single most counterintuitive idea in the entire framework. The conventional approach looks like this. You want to become disciplined, so you try to act disciplined. And when that fails, and it usually does, you conclude you're just not a disciplined person, and you're right, because the identity never moved. New behaviors were performed on top of the old self-concept, and the foundation stayed exactly where it was. The identity inversion runs it differently. You decide, not based on evidence, not based on history, that you are a disciplined person, and then you find the smallest possible action a disciplined person would take, and you take it, not because of what it produces in the world, but because of what it proves to you about you. Clear's language on this is exact. No single instance transforms your beliefs, but as votes accumulate, so does the evidence of a new identity. A 1% daily improvement compounds to nearly 38 times better after a year, not linearly but exponentially. And the early stages feel like almost nothing because materially they almost are. But the identity shift is happening underneath the surface long before the results become visible. Now consider the man who did this better than almost anyone in the modern era. In 2003, Kobe Bryant's public life collapsed. Every sponsor except Nike walked away. His career identity, the golden kid who'd come straight from high school to become an NBA champion, was gone. And the performance coach he brought in gave him a diagnosis that had nothing to do with basketball. "You're not losing your edge," he told Kobe. "You're losing your identity. You're going through an ego death." Kobe's response was to do something most people never think to do. Instead of waiting to recover the old identity, he built a new one from scratch. The Black Mamba wasn't a nickname. It was an architecture, constructed deliberately, with rituals. The Halloween theme song before games. The jersey number changed from 8 to 24. A visualization practice where he imagined stepping into a cage with the mamba and letting it consume him entirely. Vote by vote, game by game, the identity became real. His own words settled it. There is a difference between who you are and what you are, and what he became on that court was the killer snake. Stone cold, nothing personal. That's the identity inversion lived at the highest level of professional sport, under extreme public scrutiny, by a man who understood intuitively what Clear would later prove in behavioral science. The identity precedes the evidence, always, and once the accumulated votes reach critical mass, the right behavior stops being a decision and starts being an expression of who you are. Part 3. The sovereignty tax. The price you pay for running from yourself. Most personal development content won't take you here, because what lives at Part 3 isn't about habits or systems or identity architecture. What lives here is the specific, documented psychological fear that sits at the center of why most men never become who they're capable of being. Abraham Maslow spent the later years of his life studying what blocked people at the top of human potential, not what held them at the lower levels, but what blocked self-actualization specifically, what kept people from becoming the fullest version of themselves even when the material obstacles were gone. The answer wasn't circumstance, wasn't lack of resources, wasn't even trauma, though trauma was a factor. The primary obstacle was the fear of greatness itself. Maslow called it the Jonah complex, the fear of one's own highest possibilities, the evasion of destiny, the deliberate avoidance of exercising one's own talents. And Carl Jung, approaching the same territory from a different angle, described the same thing through the shadow, not just the fear of your darkness, but the fear of your light, the parts of you so capable, so far outside the comfort of ordinary life, that claiming them carries a real social cost. Maslow wrote what might be the most honest observation in the history of psychology. We fear our highest possibilities. We are generally afraid to become that which we glimpse in our most perfect moments, under the conditions of greatest courage, and even as we thrill to the godlike possibilities we see in ourselves in those moments, we simultaneously shiver with weakness, awe, and fear before those very same possibilities. Every person watching this has felt that shiver, the moment of complete clarity about what you're actually capable of, followed almost immediately by the retreat, the rationalization, the reasons why now isn't the right time, and why the conditions aren't quite right yet. That retreat is the Jonah complex running in real time, and the sovereignty tax is what you pay every day you obey it. Maslow identified the social mechanism driving it in an unpublished essay from 1966, arguing that people learn to wear what he called a cloak of false modesty or humility, specifically to avoid what he named punishment for being superior. To avoid that punishment, a person becomes humble, ingratiating, appeasing, and in doing so cripples and stunts herself, trading the life she was capable of for the one that makes other people comfortable. Now look at what the sovereignty tax looked like on David Goggins. At 24 years old, Goggins worked the night shift as a cockroach exterminator, brought home less than $1,000 a month, and described himself as depressed, broken, and completely invisible to the world and to himself. Childhood abuse, poverty, racism, and a self-concept so limited it had become a physical cage. He had been paying the sovereignty tax since before he had a name for it. And then one night, sitting in front of the television with a shake from Steak and Shake, a documentary about Navy SEALs came on, and something inside him cracked open. What followed was the accountability mirror, his term for standing in front of his reflection and getting brutally honest. No performance, no softening, no excuses. Fat, lazy, scared, running, and then he stopped running. Within months, Goggins lost over 100 pounds and began training for basic underwater demolition SEAL training, the most physically demanding military selection process in existence. He failed, came back, failed again, came back again. He completed Hell Week 3 times, more than any man in recorded history, and went on to become the only person to complete elite training as a Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, and Air Force Tactical Air Controller. He had to create Goggins, he said, because David Goggins was a weak kid, and he wanted to be proud of who he was. That is the sovereignty tax refused. His 40% rule adds the mechanism. When your mind tells you you're done, that you've reached your absolute limit, you've given approximately 40% of what you're actually capable of, and the remaining 60% is locked behind the identity you've been protecting instead of the potential you've been avoiding. Maslow estimated that only 2% of people ever reach self-actualization, and Goggins' 40% rule explains exactly why. Most people stop at 40% and call it their ceiling when it's barely their floor. Maslow's verdict on all of it was unambiguous. If you deliberately plan to be less than you are capable of being, you will be deeply unhappy for the rest of your life. Not temporarily, not for a season, for the rest of it. The sovereignty tax collects daily in the slow accumulation of unlived potential, in the persistent awareness that you are less than what you could be, and the only way to stop paying it is to stop running. Part 4. The Congruence Lock. When your identity and your actions become the same thing, everything in this framework, the shadow work, the identity audit, the new identity built vote by vote, the refusal to keep paying the sovereignty tax, all of it points toward one destination, the state where who you are and what you do stop being in conflict. Ryan Holiday built his entire body of work around this state, drawing on the Stoic philosophers, and specifically on Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who governed the most powerful empire in the world while writing private journal entries about how to remain a decent human being under absolute power. That discipline, unperformed, private, rooted in character rather than image, is the template. Holiday came up through an unconventional path, dropping out of college at 19 to apprentice under Robert Greene, the author behind The 48 Laws of Power, a book so studied for its insights into power and self-mastery that it became the most banned book in US prisons. Greene's Law 25 is direct. Do not accept the roles that society forces on you. Recreate yourself by forging a new identity. Be the master of your own image, rather than letting others define it for you. Holiday took that foundation and built it into something more precise. Pulling from the Stoics, a quote from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that became the spine of his philosophy: "The impediment to action advances action, and what stands in the way becomes the way." Surface level, that reads as advice about resilience. Underneath it, it's a statement about identity. The man who has achieved congruence lock doesn't encounter an obstacle and figure out how to survive it with his identity intact. He encounters the obstacle, and the obstacle becomes the next expression of who he is. Nothing threatens him. The identity consumes everything it touches. Holiday's argument about ego is where it becomes precise. Ego, in his definition, is an unhealthy belief in your own importance, and the problem with it is structural. Ego ties identity to external validation, which means success inflates it and failure destroys it, and the whole architecture depends on circumstances staying favorable. Circumstances never stay favorable indefinitely, which means ego-based identity is always one bad quarter, one public failure, one difficult season away from collapse. The man with a congruent identity carries none of that fragility. His confidence isn't borrowed from outcomes, which means it can't be repossessed by them either. Holiday put it cleanly: what replaces ego is rock-hard humility and confidence, the kind that can hold weight, because ego is stolen and confidence is earned. Kobe Bryant, after the public collapse of 2003, after the identity death, after building the Black Mamba from scratch and casting votes for it through one of the most scrutinized careers in sports history, won back-to-back championships in 2009 and 2000, and then scored 60 points in his final NBA game and walked off the court with the words "Mamba" out. An identity so completely constructed and fully integrated that even the ending was on his terms. Goggins, starting from nothing, from poverty, abuse, 300 pounds, a night shift spraying cockroaches, became the only man in history to complete 3 elite military training programs, holds a world record, and runs 100-mile races through conditions that would end most people's lives. Not from talent, but from a decision to stop negotiating with the version of himself that was easier to be. Both of them closed the loop that Clear described in behavioral science, and Jung described in analytical psychology, and Maslow described in humanistic psychology, and Holiday codified through the Stoics. Habit shape identity, identity shapes habits, and that feedback loop is always running, always accumulating, always building something. The only question is whether it's building the person you want to become or preserving the person you're afraid to leave behind. Congruence lock is when the loop runs entirely in your direction. Conclusion: the man you're running from is the man you're trying to be. Most people never change, not from lack of discipline, not from lack of information, because they are psychologically locked into a version of themselves they never consciously chose. And the framework you just heard is the unlock. The Elimination protocol is the honest audit. Jung's shadow work merged with Clear's identity inventory the removal of every vote being cast for a version of you that you don't respect, because you cannot build anything real on top of an unexamined foundation. The identity inversion is the rebuild, where you don't wait for evidence and you don't earn the identity before you claim it. You declare it first, cast votes for it relentlessly in small, consistent actions, and let the compounding do what compounding always does. Kobe didn't wait to become the Black Mamba. He decided, and then he proved it, one game at a time, until the decision became permanent. The sovereignty tax is the reckoning. Maslow's finding that the deepest human fear isn't failure but greatness, the confrontation with your own potential, and the social cost of claiming it. Goggins paid it for 24 years, then looked in the mirror and stopped. His 40% rule exists to remind you that what feels like your limit is barely your beginning. The congruence lock is the destination, the state where identity and action fuse, where the feedback loop runs in your favor, where failure becomes information and the obstacle becomes the path, and confidence is earned rather than borrowed and cannot be taken because it was never dependent on anything outside of you. 5 thinkers, one thread connecting all of them. The man you are running from is the man you are trying to be. Jung said the shadow grows more powerful the longer it stays unconscious. Maslow said we thrill to our highest possibilities and shiver in fear before them. Goggins said when your mind tells you you're done, you're only 40% in. Holiday said what stands in the way becomes the way. That shiver you feel when you glimpse what you're actually capable of is not a signal to stop. That shiver means you're close. The only question left is whether you're going to keep running.